Have you ever noticed how the most dangerous turning points in life do not announce themselves with chaos, but with silence? Midlife can look stable from the outside, career established, family defined, identity solidified. Yet beneath that surface, tectonic shifts are often underway. The loss of a spouse, the unraveling of a marriage, the death of a parent, or the quiet ending of a decades-long partnership can fracture the emotional architecture we have relied on for years. These moments do not simply hurt. They reorganize the brain, recalibrate stress systems, and quietly increase vulnerability to choices that promise relief but deliver captivity. In the language of modern neuroscience, grief and relational loss are not abstract emotional states. They are full-body biological events. When attachment bonds rupture, the brain's stress circuitry activates, cortisol rises, and dopamine regulation shifts in ways that leave a person both depleted and restless. Emotional pain travels overlapping neural pathways with physical pain, which explains why the body interprets heartbreak not as metaphor, but as injury. In that vulnerable state, substances such as alcohol, sedatives, or stimulants can feel less like indulgence and more like medicine. They soften the sharp edges, slow the racing thoughts, and momentarily restore a sense of equilibrium. Yet what begins as relief can gradually transform into reliance, and reliance into dependence, without a person fully realizing when the line was crossed. The tragedy is not weakness of character. It is the predictable response of a brain seeking homeostasis in the aftermath of loss. Midlife adds another layer of complexity because it often combines grief with identity disruption. Divorce can dismantle daily routines, social networks, financial expectations, and future narratives all at once. The death of a loved one can remove not only companionship, but also the role one played in that relationship. The brain, wired for attachment and predictability, suddenly confronts uncertainty. In this state, the reward system becomes hypersensitive to cues that promise comfort. Cravings may intensify not because a person desires intoxication, but because the brain is searching for dopamine stability. Stress accumulates, sleep becomes irregular, and the natural pleasures that once provided satisfaction lose their potency. It is precisely here that the slope towards self-medication steepens. What feels like a glass of wine to take the edge off can become a nightly ritual. What feels like a prescription refill to manage anxiety can become a dependency that is difficult to unwind. The process is gradual, almost imperceptible, which makes it particularly insidious. Many individuals who have maintained years of sobriety can find themselves surprised by renewed cravings during these transitions. Others who have never misused substances may begin for the first time, not out of recklessness, but out of accumulated emotional strain. The brain does not distinguish between socially acceptable coping and biologically reinforcing behavior. It responds to dopamine signals and stress relief. Understanding this dynamic is not about fear, but about awareness. When we recognize that grief has neurobiological consequences, we begin to see that resilience is not merely a matter of willpower. It requires structured processing, social connection, and deliberate strategies that regulate the nervous system without hijacking it. Midlife transitions are not inherently destructive, but unmanaged pain can become the gateway to patterns that compound suffering. The key is not to suppress distress, but to confront it with tools that strengthen rather than sedate the mind. What makes this stage of life particularly precarious is not only the intensity of the loss, but the illusion that by midlife we should already know how to handle it. There is a cultural expectation of competence at 40, 50, or 60 years old, as though emotional mastery is guaranteed by age. Yet the nervous system does not mature out of grief. When attachment dissolves, the brain reacts with ancient circuitry designed for survival. Stress hormones surge, sleep fragments, appetite fluctuates, and attention narrows around the absence. Dopamine, the neurotransmitter associated with motivation and reward, becomes dysregulated, creating a paradoxical state of exhaustion and craving. In this biochemical landscape, the promise of quick relief becomes unusually persuasive. The first drink after a painful separation may feel like reclaiming control. The first sedative after weeks of insomnia may feel like mercy. The first stimulant to push through loneliness and fatigue may feel like productivity restored. But beneath the surface, a subtle shift begins to occur. The brain learns that external chemicals can artificially restore equilibrium faster than natural processes can. Each repetition strengthens that learning. Each cycle reduces the brain's baseline capacity to generate pleasure on its own. Over time, what once dulled pain begins to amplify it in between uses, creating a feedback loop that is difficult to recognize while inside it. This is the quiet suspense of midlife self-medication. The danger rarely appears dramatic in the beginning. It hides inside normal routines, socially accepted behaviors, and prescriptions that began with legitimate intent. The person may still attend work, care for family, and maintain appearances, all while the internal reward system recalibrates around substance-driven relief. The most unsettling moment often arrives not with catastrophe, but with awareness. It is the realization that a glass has become a necessity, that a pill feels non-negotiable, that cravings appear before conscious thought. For individuals who once achieved sobriety, this stage can be particularly destabilizing. Years of stability can create confidence, yet grief-related stress can reopen neural pathways that were long dormant. The brain retains memory of reward even after abstinence, and acute stress can resensitize those circuits. For others, midlife may mark the first encounter with compulsive patterns. Responsibilities accumulate, support systems thin out, and there may be fewer spaces to openly process pain. Without structured emotional processing, stress becomes chronic, and chronic stress alters the architecture of decision-making regions in the prefrontal cortex. Impulse control weakens precisely when emotional intensity increases. This is not a moral collapse. It is neurobiology under strain. Suspense deepens when the individual recognizes the trajectory, but feels ambivalent about stopping. The substance has become both the problem and the perceived solution. Removing it threatens to expose raw grief that has not yet been metabolized. Continuing it promises short-term comfort at the cost of long-term autonomy. This internal conflict can persist quietly for months or years. The outside world may see resilience, but internally there is negotiation, justification, and rationalization. The turning point often hinges on whether the person interprets cravings as commands or as signals. Cravings are data. They indicate stress overload, attachment injury, and reward imbalance. When viewed through that lens, they become invitations to intervene rather than evidence of failure. The path forward depends on recognizing that relief purchased through chemical shortcuts carries compound interest, and the bill eventually arrives in the form of diminished freedom, amplified anxiety, and deepened isolation. The way forward begins with a radical but liberating recognition. Emotional pain is not a malfunction to be eliminated, but a signal to be processed. When loss disrupts midlife, the nervous system demands recalibration, not sedation. The work of recalibration is deliberate and structured, and it requires tolerance for discomfort without outsourcing regulation to a substance. Researchers and clinicians, such as Dr. Anna Lembke, have emphasized that the modern environment is saturated with high dopamine rewards that promise immediate comfort while eroding long-term resilience. Her framework suggests that the brain operates on a balance between pleasure and pain, and when we artificially tip that balance toward pleasure through repeated substance use, the brain compensates by amplifying pain. In the context of grief or divorce, this means that attempts to numb sorrow can paradoxically intensify it over time. Understanding this mechanism reframes abstinence not as deprivation, but as neurological restoration. When a person allows the dopamine system to stabilize without repeated artificial spikes, baseline mood gradually improves. Cravings diminish in intensity and frequency. Natural rewards, such as meaningful conversation, physical movement, creative expression, and purposeful work, begin to regain their potency. This process is not instantaneous, and it demands patience. Early warning signs of self-medication must be taken seriously before patterns solidify. Increasing tolerance, secrecy around use, preoccupation with the next opportunity to consume, and using substances in response to specific emotional triggers are indicators that coping has shifted toward dependency. Intervening early is exponentially easier than reversing entrenched addiction. Structured coping frameworks provide scaffolding during this vulnerable period. Regular sleep schedules stabilize cortisol rhythms. Aerobic exercise enhances endogenous dopamine production and reduces stress reactivity. Psychotherapy offers a contained environment to metabolize grief rather than suppress it. Social accountability, whether through support groups or trusted relationships, interrupts isolation, which is a powerful amplifier of cravings. Mindfulness practices strengthen the prefrontal cortex's capacity to observe impulses without acting on them, restoring agency at the precise moment it feels most compromised. Importantly, resilience does not mean stoicism. It means engaging pain directly with adaptive tools. Midlife transitions, while destabilizing, also offer an inflection point. The same neuroplasticity that allows maladaptive habits to form also enables healthier circuits to strengthen. Grief can deepen empathy, clarify priorities, and catalyze identity reconstruction when processed consciously. Divorce can become an opportunity to reassess values and redefine relational boundaries. The nervous system, when supported rather than chemically overridden, gradually re-establishes equilibrium. Suspense resolves not because pain disappears, but because the individual discovers capacity they did not know they possessed. Freedom emerges from the recognition that cravings are transient physiological states, not imperatives. Each time a person chooses structured coping over sedation, neural pathways of self-trust strengthen. Over months, this compounds into stability that is more durable than any temporary relief a substance can offer. The central message is not prohibition. It is empowerment grounded in neurobiology. By understanding how grief alters stress, circuitry, and reward regulation, individuals can intervene early, normalize their vulnerability, and implement protective strategies before patterns escalate. Midlife does not have to become a gateway to dependence. It can instead become a period of recalibration, growth, and renewed autonomy. If you are benefiting from our topics, please subscribe, like, and turn on the bell notification so you can see our new videos early.